Once upon a time, in the beautiful town of Ajah, there lived a young nanny woman named Caro. Caro used to be a teacher, guiding the little ones in their early years. But one day, like a bird losing its wings, she lost her job. With no money and a child of her own to care for, Caro's thoughts turned to survival. She decided to open a daycare where she could watch over the children while their parents worked. Bring your babies to me, Caro would say, her voice sweet like honey. I will care for them as my own. The parents, trusting her good name, began to bring their little ones. But behind that gentle smile, Caro hid a heart as dark as a moonless night. She was no ordinary nanny. Caro saw these children not as blessings, but as tools for something sinister. Each morning, as the town bustled with life, Caro would take the babies into her home. But instead of only feeding and playing with them, she did the unthinkable. She rented out babies to strangers she didn't even know, sending them away for reasons only she understood. Worse still, she gathered the tiny pampers of these innocent ones, selling them to rich men. These men, seeking wealth and power, used the pampers in rituals. They believed the pampers held the children's glory, their luck, their blessings, their grace. They took these blessings and made them their own, leaving the children weak and vulnerable. And so, Caro's daycare grew popular, but no one knew the wickedness that brewed inside. She smiled, she laughed, but her actions were like a snake hiding in tall grass, silent and deadly. The parents trusted her, but they didn't know that every time they left their child with Caro, they were handing over more than just a baby. They were giving away their child's destiny. But if you think that was all, wait until what later happened as babies started disappearing from Caro's daycare, and how she herself started using the babies for more sinister things that mouth could not tell. You see, Caro's dark actions will leave you shocked and even probably question your nanny after watching this story. In her early life, Caro's story began in a home where kindness flowed like a river. Her parents were known far and wide in Ajah as good Christians, always helping others and spreading joy. Caro, you must always do what is right, her mother would say, and Caro did. She was like a golden child, shining with obedience and grace. But life, like a mischievous wind, doesn't always stay calm. When Caro was in her final year of secondary school, something happened that turned her world upside down. She fell in love with her teacher, Mr. Sola, a man whose words were sweet like ripe mangoes. Caro, you are special, he would whisper. And Caro believed him. Their secret love grew until one day, Caro found out she was carrying his child. When she told Mr. Sola, his face changed as if a storm had swept over it. That's not my baby, he said coldly, stepping back like she was a stranger. You're on your own, Caro. His words hit her heart like a sharp knife. Caro was left alone, carrying shame and a baby she didn't plan for. Her parents, though kind, couldn't bear the gossip of the town. You have brought disgrace to this house, her father said, his voice heavy with sorrow. Caro, feeling like a bird with broken wings, decided to leave. She packed her few belongings and went to live with her uncle, Sardan. Sardan's house was nothing like her home. It was cold and quiet, and Caro felt the weight of her new reality. She was no longer the golden child. Life had taken a turn, and she was about to walk a path filled with shadows. Caro's life at Sardan's house was tough, but she was determined to survive. With a baby to care for, she couldn't sit idle. She found a job as a teacher in the town's nursery school. Every morning, she would carry her little child on her back and walked to the school, ready to teach and earn a living. But the money she made was like drops of water in a desert, never enough. The baby needed food, clothes, and medicine. Caro often went to bed hungry, giving her child the little she had. This can't go on, she thought, her mind restless like the wind at night. Then one day, as she sat in the classroom, an idea sparked in her mind. She noticed how many parents struggled to juggle work and caring for their young ones. What if I start a daycare? Caro whispered to herself. I could watch over their children when they're at work and make some extra money. She shared her idea with Sir Dan, who agreed to let her use part of his house. Caro wasted no time. She spread the word around town, telling parents about her new daycare. Bring your babies to me, she said with a warm smile. I'll take care of them like they're my own. The parents, remembering Caro's good family name, trusted her. They saw her as a responsible young woman who had faced tough times but still held on to her values. Slowly, one by one, they began to bring their little ones. At first, she had just 3 babies. She bathed them, fed them, and played with them. Her home was filled with laughter and the soft cries of children. Word spread quickly, and soon, Caro's daycare became a success overnight, as it was the most popular in town, out of nowhere, within just a few weeks. Parents lined up to register their babies, and Caro's business grew faster than she had ever imagined. But little did they know, behind her kind eyes and sweet smile, Caro was hiding a secret, a dark plan that would change everything. As Caro's daycare grew, so did her authority. She wasn't just running a daycare, she was creating her own little kingdom. And like every ruler, Caro had rules, strict ones. Your child's hygiene is my priority, she would say, with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She insisted on washing every baby's clothes herself. Bring them dirty and I'll return them clean, she told the parents. They were grateful, thinking Caro was going the extra mile. But that wasn't all. Caro had another rule, one that made some parents raise their eyebrows. When your baby's hair grows too long, I'll be the one to cut it, she declared. Some parents hesitated. But why, Caro? They would ask. It's for hygiene, she replied firmly, her voice like a stone that couldn't be moved. If you're not okay with it, you can take your child elsewhere. Most parents, trusting her completely, didn't question further. After all, Caro had been nothing but caring and reliable. Who would doubt a woman with such a good heart? But there were a few who dared to challenge her. One father, whose child's hair was neatly braided, said, "We don't want the haircut." Caro's face hardened. "Then take your baby and don't bring them back," she said coldly. The parents, not wanting to lose their spot in the popular daycare, quickly fell in line. They believed Caro was only looking out for their children's well-being. But behind those strict rules lay a dark secret. Caro wasn't cutting hair and washing clothes for hygiene. She had other, more sinister plans for those tiny strands of hair and pieces of fabric. The parents, blind with trust, handed their children over each day, unaware that Caro's rules were the first step in a much darker journey. Life at Caro's daycare went on smoothly, or so it seemed. The children laughed, played, and slept peacefully under Caro's watchful eyes. Parents picked up their little ones each evening, grateful for her care. But as the saying goes, a snake may hide in the grass, but its hiss cannot stay silent forever. One day, a mother named Mama Tenny noticed something strange. As she undressed her child after daycare, she realized the baby's underwear was missing. "Maybe I forgot to pack it," she thought to herself and let it slide. But the next day, the same thing happened. And again the day after that. Mama Tenny grew worried. This can't be a coincidence, she muttered, her brows furrowed like storm clouds. The following evening, she stormed into Caro's home. Caro, she began, her voice sharp. My child's underwear has gone missing 3 times now. What's going on? Caro, calm as ever, smiled and said, Ah, Mama Tenny, it must have gotten mixed up with the other children's clothes during laundry. Don't worry, I'll check. She disappeared into the back room and returned empty-handed. I didn't find it, Caro said, her tone apologetic. But don't worry, I'll give you money to buy new ones. She handed Mama Tenny some cash, her smile as sweet as honey dripping from a comb. Mama Tenny, though still uneasy, took the money and left, thinking Caro's kindness was genuine. Little did she know, the missing underwear was no accident. Each piece had been carefully taken for rituals that Caro performed in the dead of night. Caro watched Mama Tenny leave, her eyes cold. Foolish woman, she murmured under her breath. You have no idea what your child's grace is doing for me. And so, the parents continued to trust Caro, while the dark secrets of her daycare grew thicker than the shadows at dusk. From missing underwear to missing pampers and even missing babies later on, Caro's dark deeds continued, and no one in the town dared questioning her. But little did she know, just like the sun that comes out after dawn, her secrets are about to get exposed by someone she wasn't expecting. The sun shone brightly over Ajah that afternoon, casting its golden rays on the rooftops and beautiful streets. Birds sang, and the air was warm. It seemed like any other day, but fate had its own plans. Sir Dan, Caro's uncle, was a man of routine. He left the house early each morning and only returned late at night. But on this particular day, his errands ended sooner than expected, and he decided to head home. As he approached the house, he noticed the quiet. No laughter of children, no sound of Caro humming her usual tune. Something felt off, like a drumbeat missing in the rhythm of a song. Sir Dan pushed open the door and stepped inside. Caro? He called out, but there was no answer. He walked further into the house and then he saw it. There, in the middle of the room, was Caro. She sat cross-legged in front of a large calabash. Inside the calabash were 2 babies, their tiny forms still and silent. Around them was a pile of pampers, stacked like a twisted offering. Sir Dan's heart froze, and his eyes widened in disbelief. Caro, he shouted, his voice trembling. What is this? Caro looked up slowly, her face calm as the surface of a pond. Uncle, she said, her tone steady. You shouldn't be here. Sir Dan's hands shook as he pointed at the scene before him. This is evil. It was supposed to be small rituals, just hair and clothes. But now babies. He grabbed her arm, shaking her as if he could rattle some sense into her. Babies, Caro? You're using babies now? Do you know what will happen if the town finds out? But Caro's calm was like the stillness before a storm, unfazed. She slowly stood up, her eyes locking onto Sir Dan's. Uncle, we took an oath, she reminded him, her voice cold. If you speak, you know what will happen. Sir Dan's knees felt weak and he stumbled back, his mind racing. He had known about the hair and the pampers, but this was too much. I can't keep quiet anymore, Caro, he said, his voice breaking. The town must know. Caro stood slowly, her eyes narrowing, like a predator cornering its prey. Then prepare for death, uncle, she whispered, because once you break the oath, the spirits will take you. Sir Dan felt a chill crawl up his spine. He had seen Caro's rituals before, but this was different. The babies, the pampers, the dark energy that seemed to fill the room. It was all too much. But Caro, he pleaded, his voice softer now, almost desperate. These are innocent children. You're playing with lives. Caro's face remained as hard as stone. The town betrayed me, uncle. They took everything from me. Now I take from them. This is the price they must pay. Sir Dan's knees felt weak, and he slumped into a chair, his head in his hands. He knew she was right about one thing. The oath they took was binding. If he exposed her, it wouldn't just cost his life. It could unleash a wrath far greater than he could handle. The room fell silent, the weight of their secrets pressing down like a heavy stone. Sir Dan knew he had to make a choice. Keep quiet and live with the guilt, or speak out and face certain death. Caro turned away, her voice barely above a whisper. Uncle, the path is already chosen. There's no turning back now. But what was the secret between Caro and Sir Dan? Why will he die if he tells the whole town? Was he in on the plan with Caro? And what had the people of the town done that made her decide to use their babies? Let's find out. There Caro sighed deeply, her eyes distant as if peering into the past. Uncle, she began, her voice calm but heavy. Do you remember how it all started? Sir Dan looked up, his face still pale with fear. He nodded slowly. It wasn't always like this, Caro said. After I gave birth, life was harder than I could bear. I had no money, no job, and a baby who cried from hunger every night. I was drowning, Uncle. Sir Dan's mind drifted back to those dark days. He remembered how Caro's once bright eyes were dimmed by exhaustion and despair. She would sit in a corner, rocking her baby, tears silently streaming down her face. Oh, one day, Caro continued, her tone sharper now. You told me about a man, a prophet who could help us out of our misery. You said he could give me wealth and fame, enough to change my life forever. Sir Dan shifted uncomfortably. I thought it would be a small thing, Caro, he muttered. I didn't know it would go this far. Caro ignored his words and pressed on. We went to see him together. Do you remember the shrine? The dark room filled with the smell of burning herbs and the sound of distant chants? Sir Dan swallowed hard. The memory was as clear as day. The prophet, an old man with piercing eyes, had welcomed them with open arms. I can give you what you seek, the prophet had said, his voice low and gravelly. Wealth, fame, power. It will all be yours, but nothing comes for free. Caro nodded as if hearing the words again. He told us all I had to do was bring him something small, the hair of the children I cared for. No harm will come to them, he promised. And at first, I hesitated. I was scared, Uncle. Sir Dan closed his eyes, remembering how Caro had looked at him, seeking reassurance. And he, desperate to see her succeed, had said, It's just hair, Caro. No one will get hurt. She paused, her voice now cold and steady. I believed him. I believed you. And so, I started cutting the children's hair. Parents thought it was for hygiene, but every strand I collected went straight to the prophet's shrine. Sir Dan buried his face in his hands. We didn't know where it would lead, he whispered. Caro's lips curled into a bitter smile. But it worked, didn't it? My daycare flourished. Parents trusted me, and more children came every day. The money started flowing, just like the prophet said. She turned to Sir Dan, her eyes hard. That was the beginning, Uncle. And now there's no going back. The weight of her words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating, as Sir Dan realized just how deep they had both fallen into the prophet's dark web. Then he told her, regardless of whatever the town people had done to you, this is too much. These children are innocent. I know nothing about this. Caro's voice grew colder, as she stared at Sir Dan. Uncle, do you think I've forgotten what they did to me? Sir Dan didn't answer. His eyes remained fixed on the floor, as if looking into the past himself. Caro continued, her words sharp like a blade. The people of this town, the ones who now smile at me, once turned against me like wild dogs. She took a deep breath, her face hardening. They call me a thief, a kidnapper. They dragged me through the streets, Uncle. Do you remember how they beat me? Sir Dan flinched at the memory. The image of Caro, her face bloodied and swollen, flashed in his mind. The crowd had been merciless, hurling stones and insults. They accused me of kidnapping a child. Caro spat, her voice trembling with rage. A child who wandered off on her own. But did they listen? Number. They said I sold her to rich men for rituals. They didn't even wait for the truth. Sir Dan closed his eyes, his chest heavy. I tried to stop them, Caro, he whispered. I did. But it wasn't enough, Caro snapped. They handed me over to the police. I spent a whole year in that filthy cell, treated like a criminal. She paused, her voice breaking slightly. And then the worst news came. My parents, they died in that car accident while trying to clear my name. The room fell silent, the weight of her pain filling the air like a suffocating cloud. They killed my parents' uncle, Caro said softly, her voice now eerily calm. They took everything from me. My freedom, my family, my dignity. Her eyes darkened, like the sky before a storm. So, when I came out of that cell, I made a vow. I would make them pay. Every single one of them. Sir Dan's throat tightened. He had always known Caro's pain ran deep, but hearing it now, he realized just how much it had shaped her. They think I'm their savior, caring for their children, Caro said with a bitter smile. But I'm not. I'm their reckoning. Her words echoed in the room, a chilling reminder of the scars the town had left on her heart, and the darkness she had embraced to get her revenge. Sir Dan's breath quickened as he realized the weight of her words. He was trapped, bound by a darkness he could no longer escape. The room grew colder, and the shadows seemed to stretch longer as silence fell between them. The once simple daycare had now turned into something far more sinister, and Sir Dan knew that the path Caro had chosen would only lead to ruin. However, what Sir Dan didn't know was that after the first ritual where the prophet asked for hair, which made Caro's daycare booming and so successful, Caro's hunger for more became insatiable. The wealth she had was no longer enough, and the fame wasn't enough either. She wanted more money, more recognition, and more power. So she returned to the prophet behind her uncle, Sir Dan's back, which now led to the use of babies and selling of used pampers of the babies. The shrine was darker this time, the air thicker with smoke and the smell of burning herbs. The prophet sat waiting, his eyes gleaming like coals in the dim light. You've done well, Caro, he said, his voice deep and hollow. But if you want more, the path grows darker. Caro hesitated, but her desire was stronger than her fear. What must I do? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. The prophet smiled, his teeth sharp and unsettling. The hair was only the beginning, he said. Now, you must bring me the pampers and underwear of the children. They hold the essence of their innocence. The underwear will be used to upgrade your own wealth, while the pampers will be sold to my other clients who need them. With these, your wealth will multiply from the sales of used pampers, and your name will spread far beyond this town after using their underwear for your own ritual. Caro's heart pounded, but she nodded. I'll do it, she said, her voice firm. And so the ritual deepened. Each day, Caro would carefully collect the soiled pampers and tiny underwear of the babies in her care. She stored them away, making sure no one noticed. Then, late at night, under the cover of darkness, she would take them to the prophet's shrine. There, some men would meet her, take the pampers, and then hand her bags of cash, more money than she'd ever held in her entire life. Then, surrounded by flickering candles and strange symbols, Caro performed rituals more sinister than before. The chants were longer, the offerings darker. The prophet guided her, his voice echoing through the night like the wail of a lost spirit. True to his word, Caro's wealth grew. More parents brought their children to her daycare, and her fame spread beyond Ajah. People spoke of her with admiration. Caro is the best nanny, they said. She's a blessing to this town. But behind these smiles and praise, the darkness consumed her. The rituals took a toll. Caro's once gentle eyes grew cold, and her laughter became hollow. The house that was once filled with joy now held an eerie silence after sundown, as if the walls themselves knew the terrible secrets within. And though she had everything she ever wanted, the price of her newfound power was more than anyone could imagine. But Caro didn't stop there, and what she did next would never make you ever want to take your child to a daycare, even if it's owned by your friend. Now, I believe you've heard about missing children in daycare and orphanages, right? Yes, that's Caro's next dark action. But will she get away with it this time? Just keep listening attentively to find out. You see, Caro's hunger for more money couldn't be satisfied by selling used pampers alone. She wanted more. So one night she returned to the prophet, and this time she was ready to give it all it takes, even if it requires taking the lives of the babies. The night was darker than usual, as if the stars themselves refused to watch what was about to unfold. In the dimly lit shrine, the prophet sat cross-legged, his eyes glowing like embers. His voice was low and heavy, like the rumble of distant thunder. "The time has come, Caro," he said. "You've done well, but to secure ultimate power, you must make the final sacrifice." Caro's heart pounded in her chest, but her face remained expressionless. "What must I do?" she asked, her voice steady. "You will need 2 babies," the prophet said, his tone as cold as the night air. "Place them in the calabash, surrounded by their pampers. Their innocence will fuel your rise to power." Caro nodded, her mind already set. She returned home, her steps slow but purposeful. Once inside, she began preparing for the ritual. She laid out the large calabash, its surface covered in strange symbols, and surrounded it with the pampers she had carefully collected. The babies slept peacefully in their cribs, unaware of the dark fate being planned for them. Caro gently lifted them, placing their tiny bodies inside the calabash. Their soft breathing filled the room, a stark contrast to the heavy silence that loomed. As she lit the candles around her, their flickering flames cast eerie shadows on the walls. Just then, the door creaked open, and Sir Dan stepped inside. His eyes widened in horror at the sight before him, and that was how Sir Dan caught her and discovered how deep she'd gone into that dark world. The calabash sat in the center, the 2 babies inside sleeping peacefully, unaware of the danger that loomed over them. Sir Dan's mind raced, torn between 2 impossible choices. "If I speak out, the oath will take my life," he thought, his throat tightening with fear. "But if I stay silent, these innocent children will die." Now, if you were Sir Dan, would you save the babies by exposing Caro to the whole town and die after that? Or you would stay silent to avoid death and hope somehow someone else would catch and expose Caro one day? And what do you think would happen to the children that Caro had used their hair, pampers, and underwear? Do you think they won't be hurt at all as the prophet had promised? And how will they get back their blessing, luck, and grace that Caro had used and also sold to other wealthy men at the prophet's shrine? Subscribe to find out all that later happened in part 2 of this story. I hope you enjoyed the tale. If so, please like the video, share it with your family and friends, comment on it, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell for more enchanting tales like this one. Goodbye.